If anyone hasn't seen one of the other stories I've posted on here, I'll give the same background. I am and have been a paramedic for about 10 years. My entire career has been spent in emergency medicine, responding to 911 calls and providing advanced life support for life-threatening illnesses and injuries. The calls we respond to range from inappropriate use of an ambulance to minutes away from death, and oftentimes it's already too late. If you have read my other stories here, then you know the background. But in 2014, I moved to another city a couple hours away from home to work. The city was smallish, less than 100,000 people, but the ambulance serviced the entire county where the city resides. At that time, there was a significant oil boom in the area, so thousands of people flooded the city and county to work in the oil fields nearby. This caused the city to get a little rougher as you had people from all over the country moving there to work, and that many people in a small place increased the cost of living, and we saw a large increase in violent crimes as well as traumatic injuries. We worked 24-hour shifts, which weren't too bad. The days were usually somewhat busy, and at night, the ambulance station had rooms with twin beds that allowed you to get some fairly decent sleep at night. Most of the calls that would classify as crazy, creepy, or scary always tend to come at night. The day that this story takes place was a little different than normal. Normally, I get an EMT basic partner, which means, since I am the advanced provider on the truck, I get all of the patients. But today I had another paramedic partner because we were training in a new hire paramedic. It was her first day in FTO, field training orientation. This means we generally let her take the calls and sit back and evaluate her performance to ensure she is capable and doesn't kill anyone. This was her first job after graduation, so she was still pretty green. I could see she was very nervous and trying very hard to do her best. So as per usual, the day was pretty busy, but as it began to wind down, I was getting ready to attempt to take a nap. I kick off my boots and lay down on the bed on top of the covers. Easier to get up and going that way if a call comes in. I put my radio up by my head, full volume like always, so I can be sure to wake up if we get a call. Sure enough, midnight starts to roll around and I hear a call go out. Dispatch says, "A man who has been stabbed is not breathing." Luckily, it's not my call. And another ambulance responds, so I go back to bed. Or try to. About 30 minutes later, another call goes out, and this time it is for me. Dispatch information, man with a knife wound on his hands, police are on scene. I get my boots on, wake up the new girl and my partner, and walk out to the ambulance. The area of the call was right smack dab in the middle of downtown. We responded non-emergent as it was not a life-threatening injury. As we arrive on scene, there is probably around 6 police cars on scene, all with their lights on. The area itself was through an alleyway and behind a building just off the main street. As we pull up, there are a number of officers, a couple sheriff deputies, and a detective all standing around this man with a rag on his hand. As I got closer, I could see the man was bald, middle-aged, and had almost a homeless look to him. He also had a big, dark spot in the middle of his forehead. One of the officers approached me to fill me in on what's going on before I talk to the guy and start to treat him. The officer tells me the man has a large laceration on the back of his hand that he received from a knife. At this point, I was still a bit groggy and didn't put 2 and 2 together. The officer says the man said he was attacked by another man, and that he is probably going to need stitches. So as it is not serious, I have my FTO approach first to begin her assessment and give me her treatment plan. I stay close behind her and we both walk up to the man who was in handcuffs. As we approach, the dark spot on the guy's forehead is now clear, on the center of his forehead, Stretching from his eyebrows and what would have been his hairline is the biggest swastika tattoo I have ever seen. My FTO begins to talk to the man as I stand back and observe. Something about that man's general composure and responses chilled me. When we first walked up, the man was muttering something underneath his breath. I couldn't tell what he was saying, but he was repeating it over and over. My FTO asked police to uncuff him to see the cut on his hand more clearly. At this point, one of the other officers produced the knife he believes to be the weapon that caused the injury. The knife was in an evidence baggie and it was covered in blood. It was nothing special. It just looked like a cheap plastic pocket knife, like you would buy at some cheesy gift shop. It was a folding knife with a black plastic handle and a blade that was maybe 3 inches long, with a bit of serration towards the handle. The man showed us his hand. On the back, cutting right through another large swastika tattoo, it was a laceration that went from the base of his pinky finger to the lower fleshy part of the thumb. It was quite wide also, approximately 3 centimeters, exposing the bones of his metacarpals, as well as tendons. The bleeding had mostly stopped with pressure from the towel he was holding onto. When my partner asked the man what had happened, the man then repeated to us what he had been repeatedly muttering to himself. "I killed him, man. He's dead, man. I had to have killed him. He's gotta be dead." At this point, I'm starting to put it together and understanding the larger picture. We get the man into the ambulance so we can assess for any other injuries that may not be visible under his clothing. After a thorough search, we realize there are no other injuries, so we begin to transport him to the hospital. My FTO bandaged the man's hand, and as we are driving, I start to ask questions to try and figure out the details. The man told me everything I wanted to know, and never lost that chilling vibe, staring distantly as he recounted what happened. The man told me that he is homeless and was wandering around when a friend offered him a ride. He says that he was leery of the man but decided to get in anyway and accept the offer. The man said the friend began asking him if he hated N-words. The man said he didn't and that he wasn't racist. He tells me this is when his friend became upset with him and tried to stab him with a pocket knife. The man said he attempted to defend himself, managed to wrestle the knife away from his friend and stabbed him back before jumping out of the car and running. So with this shocking telling of the tale, we continue to transport the man in silence. Also, as a side note, an officer rode in the ambulance with us the whole way. After we dropped the man off at the ER, we all kind of sat there shocked leaving the hospital. We returned to the station and tried to get some sleep. However, we were not destined for sleep this night. An hour later, we get another call for a body removal from downtown, less than 3 blocks away from our last call. We pull up to the area, which is the middle of the street. The street itself is blocked off 100 feet on both sides by a fire truck and police cars. The fire truck was equipped with a double stack of 4 halogen lights, risen up on the ladder shining down to illuminate the area. Walking up with the stretcher and body bag, the detective on scene tells us they are done with the investigation, and they are ready for us to take the body to the medical examiner's office. At this point, we are still about 50 feet away from where the body lay. From where we are, I can see the person lying in the middle of the street. We get closer and take a few minutes to examine the body. What I see in putting together what I was told is astonishing to say the least. The man, another middle-aged man, appears white, possibly Mexican, lays in the middle of the street on his back, with his arms spread eagle and his legs straight. There is a vehicle parked on the side of the road, with its driver door still open. I figured that must be this guy's vehicle. It was parked neatly, not haphazardly or incorrectly. The deceased man has streaks of blood coming from his nose and mouth, with several small puncture wounds on his face and cheeks. Looking at his torso, there are about a dozen more knife-shaped puncture wounds in his chest and abdomen. Most of the wounds were so jagged and barbaric looking, you could see adipose tissue, fat, pushing out of them. There wasn't much of a blood puddle under the man, but a very large trail of blood ran from the man to the side of the street where the curb is. The blood then continues, its flow another 10 feet along the curb before spilling into a storm drain. With that much blood, the man was exsanguinated and bled out there in the middle of the street. We packaged the man into the body bag and transported him to the ME's office. When we got back to the station, my charge medic told me the officer that rode with the first patient requested that we fill out a report on what we heard the man say. Thankfully, the rest of the shift was uneventful. Fast forward to a couple years ago, I received a call from the state's attorney. He asked if I remembered the call, to which I informed him I do. He told me that this person is going to trial for murder, is pleading not guilty, and he would like to go over my statement with me as I would be a key witness and require my testimony in court. We went over my statement and we talked about it a bit. Then he told me he would be in touch and wished me a good day. A few days later, he calls me up again and informs me that the man changed his plea to self-defense and that I was needed in court in a week. Literally one day before the trial, he calls me up again. He tells me this time the man changed his plea to guilty, and I was no longer needed. I don't know what happened after that. I never really looked into it. It's just another brick in the wall, so to speak. A story filed away in my brain, probably never to be forgotten. This happened around 2021 in India, around COVID period where lockdowns were still very much effective. My dad used to live in another city, and my brother was in college, and my mom had a government job, so she had to go to her office every day. So I was basically left alone from 10 a.m. to around 6 p.m. We used to live in an apartment unit, but it had 2 doors. One was the main door, and the other one was located in the biggest bedroom, basically my parents' room. The door was clearly locked with an actual lock from the outside, and it also had a metal sliding door, the one with the chain structure. I'm from India, so you can Google elevators to find out what I'm talking about. And it was also locked from the outside. We had a ring bell on the outside, but it was just connected to a small bulb in the bedroom. Sorry for this being so long, but you have to get the gist of the area. So one day around 12 p.m., I was in my room, which was basically adjacent to my parents' room, and I felt, I don't know, weird, so I just went to check their room. I went to the room to see the bulb blinking, which means someone was ringing the doorbell. My mom used to say ignore it because if it was someone we knew ringing it, they would know the real door. I stood there for a moment when the person started knocking really hard on the door, like it was straight up rattling up. But the thing was, due to the metal gate in front of it, it would be very hard to put your hand inside to knock at the actual door. Even I couldn't put more than half of my palm. I was also a teen back then, so I wasn't that big. And this man was straight up banging on it. I got scared and called my mom, who told me to not panic. But I was really weirded out, so I locked my parents' door with the lock they had and went downstairs to chill in my brother's room. It was one of those days where my mom straight up wouldn't return until like 8 p.m., so I was alone for a long time, and I was scared to even go upstairs. Around 6 p.m., our helper auntie came, and I was a little better that someone else was in the house, And during that time, I used to take private tuitions and my teacher used to come around 7:30 p.m., so I felt better that I'd be having people. Our main door had a big window just beside it, so whenever someone was at the door, we used to open the window to check who was there before opening it. But Auntie had the habit to open it without checking, like you memorize the timings of people so you open it 'cause, it'll be them kind of thing. Fortunately, that day when the doorbell rang, she opened the window and then she came to my brother's room to tell me I had a cake delivery. Thing was, I didn't obviously. So I went out to check through the window. There was a man with a cap hiding his face holding a very small box. Now a cake box is very square and big, right? Even a pound cake has a big ass box. And in India, we have a very small sweet box, so imagine a 100-gram sweet box being called a cake box. And I asked him who was the delivery for. He didn't give me any name, not even of the company. Just told me it was for our flat. I called my mom and asked if she had made the delivery and she didn't know what I was talking about. So the dude was like, just accept the box, open the door. And by a miracle, my teacher walked up the stairs and asked what was happening. The dude saw my teacher and ran up the stairs. We lived on the first floor, and we let our teacher enter. Later, when my mom inquired about a delivery guy coming to our flat with our security guard, he said he wasn't there at his post for around half an hour when it had happened. And we didn't have CCTVs in our building, so no one saw him. It wasn't that scary maybe, but it did shake me up. And I asked my mom to at least come quickly from her office on the next day. And I didn't stay upstairs when I was home alone. So I moved into a duplex with my ex about 3 years ago in what we thought was a safer part of the city. One of our neighbors, Amber, works in the duplex rental office, and her husband, Ed, was at the time fresh out of prison. Much later, we would see all of the swastika tattoos. He had been doing and continues to do landscape work for the rentals like mow the lawns, cut down trees, etc. Other than that, he is home mostly doing odds and ends things like tinkering with his mower or truck or something. They both are super nice people, very kind and loving towards others, and always offer to help out. We have smoked weed together a few times. Ed smokes more than Amber, and have talked about all kinds of things, so I thought I could trust them and felt very safe being their neighbor. I once mentioned how sometimes when I'm home alone, I hear steps in the attic over my room, and what sounds like a chair being dragged. How sometimes the noise follows me around the house and always freaks me out to the point of calling someone just to feel a little safer until the noises die down. Ed said, "What, you think we're spying on you?" in a laughing way, but it creeped me out a little. So then I break up with my boyfriend and he moves out. This is recent, so a few months ago. Ed started texting me asking if I wanted to smoke while Amber was still at work. I declined every time, finding different excuses because I still felt uncomfortable around him. Then he asked if I wanted to have sex with him because he thinks Amber is cheating on him, and I definitely shut that down, and it was awkward as hell. I didn't tell Amber because I didn't want to get kicked out or have some horrible awkward tension, and I hate confrontation, so I kept quiet. That's when I start to hear things in the attic above my room more often. It freaked me out even more when I woke up to a loud bang outside my front door at about 3 or 4 a.m. When I went to examine it, there was a small lockpick outside my door on the ground, but no one around. I kept the lockpick, and the next day, I texted a picture of it to Amber to let her know I thought someone was creeping around, and she said, "Oh, that's Ed's. That's his ice pick, not a lockpick, sweetie. No one can pick your deadbolt with that." But I know the difference between a 4-inch skinny lockpick and an ice pick. I'm so scared to be alone here, especially at night. Our attics connect, and it's not outlandish to think he could be up there spying on me. I even found a freshly drilled hole in the ceiling of my room. I just put wadded up paper in it and try not to think of it. I honestly hope nothing comes of it and I'm just being paranoid. Edit. For everyone saying to call the police, I really have no evidence. I have the lockpick still and pictures of my door being messed with. But when I've gone into the attic, it's been completely empty. I've never gone in alone because its opening is in my garage and there is no ladder, so it requires 2 people. But as of now, it is a gaping hole above my washer and dryer and very hard to get into without good upper body strength. I'd call my ex to come home when the dragging would start, and by the time he got there, it'd be cleared out. So I'm hesitant to report anything with no evidence. This is 100% true. I'm staying with my boyfriend until I move out in a few weeks, despite my neighbors being upset I'm leaving. To address another thing, I didn't see any swastika tattoos until months after I had been hanging out on their back porch to smoke with them. He had his shirt off for the first time and there were at least 3 on his body. Confused me because Amber and Ed are super Wiccan. She has Wicca tattoos all over and stuff, and so I believe maybe his tattoos were for protection in prison. Either way, after that I stopped hanging with them and would only speak to them if we were both outside at the same time.